What happens the moment the medical charts go flat?
It's the question, isn't it?
It is the most universal, most compelling, and most frustratingly unanswerable question humanity has ever faced.
Mhm.
But what if thousands of people across the globe, separated by culture, by religion, by profound skepticism, all started reporting the exact same hyper-detailed answer?
That is the phenomenon of the near-death experience, or NDE. And that's exactly what we're diving into today.
For decades, these NDEs were, largely dismissed.
Right, the scientific community saw them as mere hallucinations, chemical surges in a dying brain, or that classic tunnel vision you get from lack of oxygen.
Anoxia, yeah.
But our sources today suggest that the data, the actual reports from survivors, is far more coherent and surprisingly verifiable than conventional science often accepts.
To really get into this, we took a deep dive into two central sources. First, the foundational work of John Burke in his book Imagine Heaven.
Where he spent decades just compiling and analyzing thousands of these reports.
And second, the 2023 documentary film After Death, which chronicled the stories of NDE survivors and brought in analysis from some key figures in the field.
So our mission today is to move past simple belief or, disbelief. We're really acting as impartial analysts here, just focusing purely on pattern recognition.
Right. We want to synthesize the core elements reported across these diverse global accounts, the surprising commonalities, and then examine the arguments for and against taking them as evidence.
Evidence of conscious survival beyond clinical death.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission is to understand what core patterns emerge and, maybe more importantly, why these reports convinced highly skeptical people.
Like John Burke, who we should definitely start with.
His background is so key here. He wasn't a preacher or a philosopher. He was an analytical agnostic engineer.
And that's what makes his work so interesting. Burke's research started back in the late 70s, and it was driven by a personal crisis.
His father's cancer diagnosis.
Exactly. He went looking for empirical evidence of an afterlife, and he picked up his first book on NDEs while visiting his dad in hospice.
And he didn't just read a few books. He took that engineer's approach, right? Synthesizing data.
A huge amount of data.
Yeah.
He systematically studied over 1,000 NDE cases over 35 years.
And these were from everywhere. Every continent, different age groups, totally different religious or even non-religious backgrounds.
He was just looking for statistical consistency. And out of those thousands of accounts, he identified 40 commonalities.
Which he then distilled down to 12 core, globally consistent experiences.
And his goal wasn't to use NDEs to, create a new theology. It was to compare these uninfluenced cross-cultural reports against established ancient texts, specifically Scripture.
To see if the report's colored in the picture, as he puts it.
Exactly.
Now, on the other side of our source stack is the film After Death. And this film, it presents the testimonies themselves. It mixes these interviews with really compelling personal stories.
It features people like a former airline pilot, Dale Black. And you get analysis from medical experts like cardiologist Dr. Michael Sabum, and even the man who coined the term NDE, Dr. Raymond Moody.
The film's approach is so effective because it forces you to confront the consistency of the stories and, the credibility of the people telling them.
These are doctors, military personnel, people who were skeptical themselves and were just profoundly changed by what happened.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. Why did a skeptical, data-driven engineer leave his career and devote his life to researching this?
Right.
The answer isn't just in the subjective piece they report. It's in the verifiable details that really challenge those standard materialist explanations.
Exactly. And before we get to the verification, we have to acknowledge the main scientific critiques.
Of course.
I mean, if a patient is clinically dead, the brain has stopped functioning. So the argument is that these experiences are generated by a brain in distress.
A chemical explanation, lack of oxygen anoxia, or maybe a release of DMT, or something happening in the temporal lobe.
Right. These things are responsible for generating these intense hallucinatory images.
So the brain is basically running out of fuel, and it conjures up this beautiful, comforting exit strategy.
That's the argument. So how does Burke's data address those physiological mechanisms?
By presenting data that happened outside the body.
At a distance and with verifiable accuracy, a common element of the NDE is the out-of-body experience, where consciousness seems to leave the physical body.
But it remains aware of everything happening, the medical efforts, the people in the room.
Right. And it's often described as a spiritual body that feels more alive with really heightened senses.
Okay, let's look at the classic objective evidence. We should start with the dentures case that Burke cites.
Oh, this one's a good one. A man is rushed into the ER after cardiac arrest. His vital signs are flat.
And crucially, his EEG was flat. So no measurable electrical activity in the cerebral cortex, the part of the brain responsible for higher thought.
And while they're intubating him, a nurse removes his dentures and places them in the lower drawer of the crash cart. A week later, the patient wakes up.
Yeah.
And he tells that nurse exactly where she put his lost dentures.
Oh, way.
Yes. He recounts her actions, where she was standing, the appearance of the room. All things he couldn't possibly have witnessed while his body was comatose and his brain was supposedly offline.
That specific, accurate recall, that's what breaks the hallucination theory, right?
It has to. I mean, if the brain is hallucinating due to anoxia, why would the hallucination coincidentally be a perfect, real-time observation of what was happening several feet away?
And this isn't an isolated case. There's another famous one highlighted in the after-death film, the red sticker case.
Oh, yeah. A woman named Mary dies while giving birth. While she's out of body, she travels through a tunnel, encounters this loving god of light, and is told she has to return for her son.
And on her way back?
On her way back, she passes back through the ceiling of the delivery room, and in that moment, she notices a specific red sticker on the top side of the ceiling fan.
That's fascinating because she was never in a physical position to see the top of that fan.
Never.
So what happens when she wakes up?
She accurately reports the sticker to the nurses. They have to get a ladder to climb up and verify it's there.
Wow.
And these verifiable data points, the location of dentures, the sticker on a fan, they all point to conscious observational awareness that seems to be independent of the physical brain.
And there's a study on this, right, Dr. Jan Holden?
Yes, her meta-study on these verifiable observations, it found that 92% of the details NDE patients reported about their resuscitation were completely accurate.
92%. That's significantly higher than control groups who were just guessing.
Hugely significant. But a skeptic might argue that, nurses or doctors talk about the incident afterward, and maybe that could plant the memory.
That's a fair point.
It is, but Burke highlights that NDEs often report details the medical team had forgotten or considered totally insignificant until the patient woke up.
Like the exact drawer the dentures were in, or a random sticker on a fan no one pays attention to.
Exactly. And the control groups in Holden's study, who were just guessing what might happen, had a tiny fraction of that accuracy, the consistency and the specificity. They argue pretty strongly against post-event suggestion.
Okay, so if the objective data suggests consciousness is outside the body, we have to ask the next profound question. Where does that consciousness go? Let's pivot from the verifiable physical details to the consistent descriptions of the transcendent state, starting with, well, maybe the most mind-bending evidence of all.
The blind seeing.
Yes.
This is maybe the most fundamental challenge to our understanding of perception. We know that people blind from birth do not dream in images.
Right. Their reality is based on sound, touch, spatial reasoning, not visual input.
And yet, when they have an NDE, they report the ability to see. And they describe the same visual phenomena as sighted people.
The story of Vicky is so powerful. Blind from birth, she's in a serious car accident at 22.
And while she's out of her body, she realizes the body below is hers. She notes her long hair, and she sees an orange blossom on her wedding ring.
Details she could not have known visually.
Not a chance. And then she reports shooting up through the ceiling and seeing the cityscape for the very first time, describing the same vivid colors and light seen by everyone else.
Seeing without biological eyes, that suggests the consciousness, this spiritual body, has some other way of perceiving things.
A non-physical means of perception. If these events are happening in what Burke calls a super-real state, beyond our normal physical reality, then the consistency of the experience becomes the next compelling piece of the puzzle.
He has an analogy for that, right? The transition from a two-dimensional world to a three-dimensional one.
Yeah, it's a great way to think about it. He suggests we live like a figure drawn on a two-dimensional black and white painting.
Flat.
Totally flat. And death is the soul being killed off that surface, emerging into a three-dimensional world of full color, which was always there, but just inaccessible to the flat figure.
And that explains why every single experiencer says the NDE state feels more real than earthly life.
Right. It aligns with C.S. Lewis's observation that the eternal world is much more real.
So what are the consistent features of this new dimension? Let's start with time, because that seems almost impossible for them to describe.
It is. They really struggle for words that report two dimensions of time. One is just no time, a state of pure eternal presence,
And the other.
a sense of moving time where they had all the time they needed to process massive amounts of information at each point. Some even report experiencing past, present, and future simultaneously.
Which echoes ancient texts, like Peter's statement that to the Lord a day is like 1,000 years.
Exactly.
And what about the environment? Is it just an empty void?
No, not at all. They describe a place that's not unlike Earth. Mountains, valleys, trees, flowers, but everything is experienced in new dimensions.
The colors are indescribable, the sounds are harmonic.
The beauty is overwhelming. But the most universal, the most transformative element is the encounter with the light.
This God of light and love. It's central to almost every single NDE, no matter their background. And it's always described as radiating this pure, unconditional love.
And the descriptions of this light are so specific. Vicky, the blind woman, and a commercial airline pilot both report the light coming out of everything.
Out of the grass, the trees, the birds.
Right. It's not a separate source shining on them. It's the very essence of this new world.
Burke connects this to Scripture, how Isaiah says there's no sun or moon in heaven because God is its light, and Revelation describes God as the lamp of the city.
But the cross-cultural alignment
Yeah.
is what's really stunning here.
It is. I'm thinking of Santosh, the Hindu manufacturing engineer in India.
Who had absolutely no familiarity with the Bible.
None. And he describes meeting the God of light and being taken to a holy sacred city. He describes it as a giant compound with 12 gates and a square shape.
Which is a profound, specific alignment with the description of the New Jerusalem in Revelation 21.
And then there's the story of the woman from Tehran, related to the Prophet Muhammad. She expected judgment by Ali.
But instead, she encountered this God of light, who identified himself with the same phrase Moses heard at the burning bush. I am he who is.
It just transcends religious dogma and gets to this specific core identifier.
And beyond the environment and the light, the final universal commonality that truly transforms these individuals is the life review.
A panoramic 3D holographic replay of their entire life.
But the key insight is how the review works. You aren't just watching a movie of your life.
No, you're forced to confront the absolute ripple effect of your actions through, radical empathy.
Exactly. You not only relive your own thoughts and feelings, but you also experience precisely how your actions affected others. You feel the exact sorrow or joy that you caused them.
So the evaluation is entirely focused on relationships and love.
That's the overwhelming conclusion reached globally. God is love, and the way we treat each other is what matters most. Not accomplishments, not wealth, not status.
Just relationships.
It's what transforms them. They come back completely focused on service and love, often abandoning whatever goals they had before.
So what does this all mean? These are powerful testimonies, backed by research into verifiable facts, but they are not without substantial challenges.
From both scientific and theological camps, right? We have to explore those critiques rigorously.
On the scientific side, while the verifiable observations challenge the anoxia theory, many still hold that the NDE is a complex neurological event.
Right. Some scientists argue that the feeling of leaving the body is tied to temporal lobe activity, which can be artificially stimulated to induce out-of-body sensations.
So they see the NDE as a powerful chemically induced state that subjectively feels transcendent, but is still physically grounded in the brain.
Precisely. Even if the brain is compromised, the mechanism is still within the body. A massive release of endorphins or other chemicals trying to protect the system.
The argument being that the uniformity of the NDE is just the common way the human brain shuts down under stress. It provides a coherent narrative to mask the physiological chaos.
Then you have the theological critiques. Certain groups, and they often cite resources like Amazing Facts, argue that NDEs fundamentally contradict specific scriptural statements.
Yes, their viewpoint is that the Bible alone should be the only source of spiritual truth.
And they point to verses like Ecclesiastes 9.5, which says, "The dead know nothing," or Psalm 6.5, describing death as an unconscious state, like sleep.
So for them, true paradise can only be experienced at the resurrection, which makes these NDE accounts theologically unreliable, near-truth experiences.
Yeah. And this camp is quick to cite retractions, like the case of Alex Malarkey from the boy who came back from heaven, who later admitted his story was fabricated.
Reinforcing their point that the Bible is enough.
There's also an internal debate among believers about the sheer universality of the experience.
Yeah.
How do you reconcile these NDEs with core tenets like the narrow path? since atheists, Hindus, and agnostics all report meeting the God of light and feeling immense peace,
Which leads to the darker possibility some people raise.
that it could be a deception. The Bible warns that Satan can disguise himself as an angel of light.
So this critique suggests the beautiful universal NDE might be a masterful deception designed to dismiss the need for salvation or specific religious doctrine.
And then, shifting to the secular critique, the documentary After Death faced some really harsh reviews.
Right. Critics argued that despite the compelling stories, the film lacked true empirical rigor.
Variety called it out for pretending it's science, but being fundamentally propaganda.
And IndieWire dismissed it as a brain-dead documentary, saying that solemn music and dramatic recreations don't substitute for factual proof.
And this really reflects the ongoing tension. The NDE is inherently resistant to strict empirical measurement. It rests so heavily on testimony and circumstantial evidence.
Like the verifiable details we discuss.
Right. While the consistency of the stories is data in itself, for a hard scientist, it's all anecdotal until a conscious mind can be physically measured existing outside the brain.
So we started with the question of what happens after death and found this overwhelming consistency across so many disparate sources and cultures.
From a skeptical engineer in the U.S. to a blind woman who saw for the first time, to a Hindu engineer who described the New Jerusalem.
And regardless of how you interpret these phenomena as a spiritual journey, verifiable proof, or just neurological firing, the core message remains the same globally.
Derived from that profound life review, love is the highest value, and our relationships define the quality and the lasting impact of our life.
If these NDE testimonies are even partially true, they provide an exhilarating hope for the future. But the real application, as we saw through the life review, is for today.
It is. We see that so many who experience NDEs, like the Jewish woman Heidi, who came back to become a hospice nurse, are transformed to live a life focused on love and service.
That transformation is the most tangible result.
It reminds me of that C.S. Lewis quote. You'll find that those who did the most for the present world were precisely those who thought the most of the next.
So how might knowing the commonalities of NDEs, specifically the focus of the life review on the pain and joy you caused others, change the way you approach today? That's definitely something to mull over.